Alex, you are now live.
Hello, welcome to the EMEA edition of the Cartus and Topia Distributed Workforce Solutions webinar. My name is Alex Harris. I am Vice President in Cartus's Global Talent Mobility Group, and I will be your moderator for the next hour. Before we begin, let's start with a little bit of housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded and we will make it available for all of you after the session. In order to minimize background noise, all attendees will be in listen-only mode for the entire session, but do feel free to submit any questions you have regarding today's topic in the chat area of the event. And remember, if you would like to see a specific question you have answered from the chat, you can also give that question a thumbs up. Our session today will begin with a 20-minute discussion with Cartus and Topia leaders about the current compliance landscape and why technology is so key to the solution. We will then have a live demo of Topia Compass, and also depending on time, we will finish with some Q&A. Now let me introduce you to the panelists that we have today. Joining us in this webinar, we have Steve Black, Topia's co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer, David Pascoe, Executive Senior Vice President at Cartus, and Rebecca Applewhite, Director of Solutions Consulting and Enablement for Topia. Now, as they answer questions throughout the session, they will also briefly introduce themselves and share their connection to today's topic of distributed workforce solutions. Cartus and Topia are delighted to have this opportunity today to talk to all of you about a new solution in the market, which we believe strongly solves an issue that organizations as a whole have been struggling with for a long time. Effectively, to address the challenges of distributed workforces, we have partnered with Topia to deliver an automated cloud-based compliance management solution that will enable organizations to finally have that holistic oversight and control of their business travelers and distributed workforces. So in summary, the objective for today's session is really to provide you with a heightened awareness of those challenges and of course to share our solution. So to kick us off, let's first turn to you, Steve. Can you please share with us what are some of those challenges in managing a distributed workforce, both US domestically and across the globe? And specifically, what are the ramifications of not taking action against those risks?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex, and great to be here today. In my role as owner of product and strategy at Topia, I spend a lot of my time helping companies understand this growing list of risks around the globe. And when you think about the broad areas that fall under business travel, remote work, and distributed workforce compliance, it's pretty wide-ranging. It includes tax, payroll, immigration, social security, posted worker, and other employment regulations around the world. And organizations need to ensure they're withholding and paying the right taxes for where they and their employees are. They need to make certain that their employees have the right visas, work permits, documentation, and more. And I think we saw last year that enforcement around compliance took a bit of a backseat during the pandemic, as many countries and states relaxed the rules to accommodate for the unprecedented times that we found ourselves in. But looking forward, I think we've seen that the financial stresses and budget gaps have risen across the globe, and that means that governments at a state, at a country level, are going to be pushing even harder to get their fair share of tax revenue and hold organizations compliant. And then you add on top of those more recent developments, we had other headwinds coming that are finally in effect with Posted Workers Directive, and Brexit, again, took a little bit of the backseat with the pandemic. But as we start to return to work, as we start to see borders opening this spring and summer and travel returning, companies are finally going to have no choice but to deal with many of these challenges. And technology will play a big role in avoiding these risks. failing to manage compliance and risking non-compliance with local rules can be very costly as governments look to increase those collections from employees and businesses. So having an employee working somewhere that you weren't aware of can end up coming back to bite you in the end. I think with COVID, we all have our favorite anecdote and story of an employee who maybe chose to go ride out the pandemic on a beach in Bali and maybe forgot to mention that to HR, to their teams. And that can have real personal and corporate implications if you get caught in an audit in a situation like that. Fines, penalties, and tax bills could range in the millions of dollars. And there's also the people and time costs that come with an audit, right? Hundreds of thousands in legal fees, tens of hundreds of hours spent defending and preparing that data. And if you inadvertently create a permanent establishment in another country, there's now subject to corporate taxes in that location. And so ultimately, I think the key is to have the right technology to identify, manage, and avoid these risks before they occur. And across the board, I mentioned a number of different use cases already, but organizations need to be thinking about tackling each of them when it comes to this current world of work. Various jurisdictions have already started to become increasingly focused on enforcing new laws and existing laws more strictly. Even before the pandemic, we saw New York State tripling the number of audits it's doing for non-resident payroll withholding, and governments across the board becoming more aggressive. And one of the things we saw as part of all the various use cases was actually one company now using Topia Compass ended up being handed a bill for more than $5 million for payroll non-compliance due to a lack of withholding for non-resident employees. And without those good systems and processes in place, it was a painful, messy, and costly audit that took place, and something that many organizations are trying to get ahead of and solve today. And so overall, we see a number of different use cases, which we've outlined on the next slide here, that really show and articulate the challenges that organizations and teams are facing. So Rebecca will bring them to life a little bit today when we get into the demo. But for those folks across Europe, the Schengen area compliance with the UK no longer being part of the EU is a big deal. Pre-travel checks are now required to think about permanent establishment risk, and that's not to mention the other risks around permanent establishment and payroll withholding that have been in place for some time but are now increasing in importance. So ultimately, our advice is to get ahead of the audit, to act like it's coming, because odds are it's going to come your way before too long. So that's, I guess, a quick lens into the challenge organizations face and the new risks of the world of work. So Alex, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Steve. So David, let me turn to you for a moment. So considering the state of that remote work today and the associated risks that Steve shared with us, why, in your perspective, is technology the right solution?
Okay, thanks, Alex. Good morning, everyone, and great to be here. So firstly, let me add a little context about my role at Cartus. I'm the executive sponsor for MovePro 360, Cartus's technology mobility hub, and I'm also responsible for all of Cartus's offices worldwide outside of North America. So as a result, corporate and individual compliance and the customer experience are near and dear to me and always front of mind. So I really appreciate Steve setting the stage and your question, why is technology the solution? The simple answer is the scope and issues, as Steve just mentioned, are so numerous, complex and dynamic that it will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to solve without leveraging technology. In my opinion, you really need a layer of technology coupled with effective human management to be in compliance to protect your company and your employees from potentially very serious consequences. We know that manual efforts are time intensive and have just not worked very well in the past. Companies have been talking about compliance concerns for business travelers for years and years, with the vast majority not addressing or taking action, in part due to the major challenges that Steve mentioned. If you think about it, for starters, you need to know as a company the location of all your employees at all times when they are working. That's a huge undertaking, and who is responsible for that in the organisation, especially when it transcends multiple departments. This has been a concern for business travellers for many years, but as Steve mentioned, now with the surge of remote workers and the actions of the taxing jurisdictions, this has become even more important. So the question for you is, do you know where your employees are right now? Post-Brexit, this has become an even more important issue in Europe with the heightened scrutiny on compliance around the waves of new rules and legislation and the ambiguity that goes with that. And as we've heard and we know, penalties may be assessed for failure to comply. So beyond that, you need to know the laws of each jurisdiction, and that's clearly a daunting task, considering all the different taxes and legal or immigration jurisdictions. Those laws are always subject to change any time, and that you need to track and understand when to take action. So with respect to action, you obviously need to ensure compliance. It's one thing to know the laws, it's another to make sure you and your employees are complying with those laws. As Steve mentioned, payroll, wage reporting, tax filings, and immigration filings, and then understanding the corporate risk the physical presence of employees can create with unintended tax implications at the corporate level, potentially impacting corporate tax responsibilities and liabilities. Finally, you have duty of care. So failure to comply with the laws is, could result in penalties and even prison in the worst case scenarios. So finally, to accomplish all of this, you need to develop timely and sustainable processes and workflow to act, instruct and inform before there's a problem, not after. So it's really just too much to handle manually and too important to rely on individuals to self-report. Manual efforts can work in limited circumstances, but we know they are not easily scalable or sustainable. So really, to sum it all up, why is technology so important? Because technology can help you access, aggregate and distill data that already actually exists in your own systems or third-party systems that you're working with. It can capture and utilize critical information or data as it's happening real time. If you think about mobile apps and GPS tracking, it can use sophisticated algorithms to sort through the complexities to discern actionable info. And then it can automate processes to notify, instruct, inform. And finally, it can generate the reporting in real time as needed for all stakeholders. So I'll stop there and hope that answers your question.
Thank you, David. Yes, it does. Would you be able to elaborate on how the partnership between Cartus and Topia developed?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, hopefully Steve and I have set the stage for why compliance is important. And I don't think there has been a more critical time to focus in this area with business travel set to resume once the world is vaccinated and remote work is likely to be the new normal. With that landscape in mind, it was important for Cartus to be able to offer a solution to our clients, especially as many organisations are thinking of or have already placed these employee populations under the management of global mobility. And I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see. Cartus spent a lot of time and energy identifying the right solution for our clients, trying to balance the pros and cons of building or licensing the right technology. Quite simply, in our opinion, the Compass tool Topia have developed is the clear market leader in this space. So utilising their technology to power our end-to-end holistic delivery model and management of the associated risk and processes made the decision an easy one.
Well, thank you both for your insights on the current global landscape, the ramifications of not acting, and also how the partnership combined with the technology will benefit companies moving forward. Just before we hand over to Rebecca for an exciting live demo of Topia Compass, a quick reminder to post any questions you have for any of today's speakers in the chat area of the event. Okay, so now let's turn to Rebecca, who is going to take us through a deeper dive of Topia Compass technology. During her demo, Rebecca will share with us the types of compliance risks that the tool's been specifically built for, how easy it is for a company to implement that tech into their organization, and very importantly, what you could expect to see in terms of data and dashboards. So Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alex, and I'm really thrilled to be able to be here today to give you a demonstration of the technology. In my role and over my career of almost 15 years in global mobility, I work with customers who are facing the challenges of managing compliance and operational risk around their globally distributed workforce. So these topics are front of mind and have been for me for many years, and I'm delighted to bring technology to help our customers manage these complex problems. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the technology. So my starting point is going to be, how do we find and identify the locations of your travelers, mobile employees, or distributed workforce? So let's start with the individual's perspective and what it looks like from the individual employee. So I've logged in to my personal employee-facing portal. You can see at the top right-hand side here that this is actually a live, active site for me. And here's my calendar. And the great thing about using technology to help track and identify locations is that it really reduces the manual effort required from individuals. No more going through Outlook calendars, emails, receipts to fill in a spreadsheet. We've got a travel calendar that is easy and quick to use. But what's really important is the source of the data in my calendar. So our technology has a flexible approach to data sources. We can use either active or passive data sources to cleanse and scrub the data and then represent it automatically by pre-filling the individual calendar, as you can see in front of you. So this week in March, I haven't touched this manually. This has all been automated on my behalf. And if I open up the data point section of a particular day, you can see precisely where we have sourced the information. In my case, I have opted in to the active application. So my laptop and mobile applications are identifying my location using the location settings on my phone or the router location on my laptop to represent at the high jurisdiction level where I was. Now that active application is fully opt-in and GDPR compliant, but of course we also have the capability to bring in passive data sources. There we go. So Topia has out-of-the-box integrations with major travel providers, including SAP Concur and BCD Travel, for example. We can bring in passive data sources not only from travel management systems, but also from expense reports, from badge swipes, other VPN logs. And what's really great is that we can use our algorithms to cleanse and read that data effectively and efficiently. So here's what that data screen looks like if we are using passive data to automatically track the individual's location. And you can see that there's a lot of lines of different travel, trip and expense data, which have been automatically read by the Topia engine to produce a determination of the location based on all of that data. So much, much simpler, quicker and automated way of reading complex data sources to present an accurate output as to the whereabouts of individuals. It's also we also fully support manual editing if needed. So the tool has assumed, based on my typical work pattern, that when I was in the UK on Monday the 1st of March, this was an allocated workday. But if I need to, I can adjust that activity or even manually enter travel or trip information using the easy to use edit functionality. The activity setting is configurable, and this is really important when it comes to the next step of the Topia technology, which is overlaying the context and compliance rules engine to calculate or impute various compliant risks or challenges. Before I get to the context engine, I want to show a quick peek of what the travel activity data can do, first from an individual point of view and then from an organizational level. So here on my individual dashboard, I have set up personal alerts and notifications relating to my individual tax residency risk. So I'm keeping an eye on locations that I know might be an issue for me, and the tool will automatically alert and notify me once the days that I spend in these locations start to track closer to my risk threshold. I've also got that full breakdown and segmented information about my travel pattern. I can adjust the time period, the activity, or I can get a closer look at each specific location in which I have spent time over a particular time period. But let's think about this from the organization's point of view. So I'm going to hop out of my personal platform and log back in as an organizational administrator. So now we have taken that individual location activity and amalgamated it together to bring you dashboards into your global travel activity or distributed workforce locations over the entire world for a specific time period. You can see at the top here, I've chosen the calendar year 2019, and I can see at a glance how many employees were traveling, which locations were visited, and where is my light to heavy travel footprint. In this demo example, I've got a heavy travel pattern in the USA. All of our dashboards can be drilled into, so I can at a glance see exactly who was in the UK in this particular time period and find more information at a detailed drill down level as to their location, activity and days. But what's really valuable is then using this information and overlaying across the top the contextual compliance and business rules logic to help solve specific compliance challenges. So let's take a look now at our withholding dashboard. This has taken that location activity information and then passed it through a rules engine to give a representation of withholding risk based on all of that location activity data. So you can see in this picture, I have an idea in the calendar year 2019 of how many employees may have triggered payroll withholding requirements as a result of their travel activity. Likewise, I can again drill down into the dashboard to see exactly which locations may have withholding requirements. And once I pass through into, for example, New York State, I again have a wealth of information as to the contextual logic that has created this withholding alert percentage. So in this example for Abdullah, we can see his domicile is usually the state of Florida in the US, but he has also triggered likely withholding in 2 other states. At the bottom of the screen, I can see his full travel activity. And this is important because what we're representing here is that we can flex and adjust the rules and threshold logic in accordance with your business approach, so that you can see that withholding only kicks in after a certain day's threshold is met. This means that we are balancing the pragmatic approach to supporting business agility according to your risk appetite and business rules with the compliance complexities and challenges of managing compliance risk across your global footprint. Let's think about another compliance use case and turn to our permanent establishment dashboard. In the permanent establishment dashboard, the theory and concept is just the same as previously discussed, but we are flexing the logic and the calculation required to give you a more accurate picture for this specific compliance challenge. So on this dashboard, I can see a picture of light, medium, and high permanent and establishment risk based on information about your employees' activities, their project, legal entity, or business unit to which they are assigned, and of course, the number of days that they have spent in specific locations. Again, I can drill down into the data to provide me with a picture of exactly which projects, legal entities, or business units may be at risk of establishing permanent establishment based on the activities of the employees that are aligned with specific projects, business units, or legal entities. We also take into account a rolling 12-month period in the calculation of days, and we assign the 183 treaty threshold. This dashboard can be used as a planning and reporting tool to try and manage upfront permanent establishment risk. For example, it may be that projects can be separated into different sub-projects as the PE risk threshold is approached to minimize future PE risk for your organization. So all of these dashboards are a useful way of representing the visualization of data about your location, activities, as well as specific compliance rules and challenges. Also, we have a full reporting suite, which is available on a self-service basis directly from the tool. Now, the reports can be used in a variety of ways, and we can help to automate and work with the compliance, the Cartus service team in understanding and managing the risks that are represented in these reports, as well as making sure that the reports end up with the downstream owners. For example, in the case of withholding day, apportionments or allocations, that these reports are provided to the required payroll teams in the format that they need. Let's have a look at a couple of those reports. So here is an example output of the withholding risk report for my anonymous demo data. So I can see here various categories of information relating to, first of all, the location activity and days, and then second, that overlaying of the contextual logic for withholding requirements. I can see the relative risk level based on work days in a specific location, cross-referenced against a low days threshold and a risk days threshold. So I can see that this individual has crossed a withholding limit threshold and therefore is likely to trigger withholding requirements in this example in the state of New York. Let's turn to another example report, in this case, a permanent establishment summary. So again, we're just bringing that data that was represented visually in the dashboards into a reporting format, and all of the key parameters and requirements in terms of assessing and planning for permanent establishment risk are also in this report, including how many days each individual or project has triggered in a specific location over a specific time period, and whether or not those days indicate the crossing of a PE threshold. We've also got, as you can imagine, the capability to slice and dice that data to meet various other compliance challenges. In this example, we are breaking down the allocated work activity into apportionments in and out of specific jurisdictions, which can be really helpful to optimize tax reporting in respect where tax reporting or other employer obligations are dependent on the source of the employment income based on the physical presence of the individuals when they are undertaking work. And we've got various other permutations of reporting and dashboards to solve a myriad of compliance challenges, including, as is top of mind for many of us today, the requirements to report and track days in and out of the Schengen area. Now we are in our post-Brexit phase. Okay, so I just want to pause there and come back to an overview of the solution that I've taken you through so far. So far today in this demonstration, I've concentrated here on the right-hand side of travel risk management. I've showed you how the Compass technology identifies location activity through either integrations with travel and expense systems or via active applications with mobile, laptop or tablet applications. I've shown you how the technology reads that information effectively and efficiently to give an accurate picture of location per day and activities. And then I've shown how we can then use that data to automate and drive various outputs, dashboards and reports to help manage specific compliance challenges. I just want to now spend a couple of minutes thinking about how to address compliance challenges in advance of a trip, travel, move or request for remote working. So the conceptual basis of the way that the technology works is very similar. If we head over to the left-hand side of the solution diagram here, the first step in assessing risk in advance of travel is identifying who is traveling in advance. And this again is where the out-of-the-box integrations with core travel management systems such as SAP Concur, BCD Travel really come into their own. Not only that though, the Topia assessment or location engine can also bring in data that's contextual about the individual traveling, the organization and host business unit for which they are working. And we do this through out-of-the-box integrations with core HCM platforms, including Workday and SAP SuccessFactors. That allows the Topia technology to run a rapid assessment based on trip information and employee data, as well as listening to your business rules. So a great example here is that we may be able to filter out zero risk travel to support your business agility without getting in the way. For example, you may wish to allow domestic US travel to go ahead as long as it's under a certain amount of days. And that's where the rapid assessment engine can really automate and drive your business policy and approaches, addressing that pragmatic balance between business agility and compliance challenge. The rapid assessment, however, can also identify where it might be likely that further information might be required from the individual about their plans, and pass the information across to a full assessment engine. And today we're partnering with CIBT and Newland Chase to bring in global comprehensive immigration logic, social security logic, and certain labour law requirements such as posted worker directive. So let's have a quick look at how that works in practice. So the first step is that the individual has booked a trip. In this example, I've used the screen from Concur, but this could equally be via BCD Travel or your other travel provider system. Topia brings that information into its rapid assessment engine, as well as pulling in core employee information from your HCM platform, such as Workday or SAP. And then subsequent to the overlay of the logic, we may identify that there might be a need for an additional assessment for this particular travel situation, and we notify the employee accordingly. This is what it looks like from the employee's dashboard in their Compass application. and they are able to access their travel assessment directly from the Compass platform. Once they're ready to undertake the assessment, they're then taken directly to the assessment tool, which has been pre-filled with the information that we've gathered about the trip, destination, and employee information. So I'll just, we're now in the live site, so I'm just going to enter the information into the boxes here, but this would be pre-filled in a live example. In this case, I've got a capability to select the planned activity. I'm going to say that I'm carrying out existing duties in another office. And based on my answers at that section, we then might be taken through an extra step to determine, in this case, the location of my salary, the location of my contract, and optionally, I can enter my salary, which may help down the track with a more detailed immigration analysis. And then straight away, I'm going to get a result from the information that I've entered. In this particular case, it looks like I may have categorized my activity in the host location as work, and therefore there is some likely immigration risk in reference to this specific trip. And you can see in this result that we might have a couple of different options that are suitable for this trip. And it's at this stage that you can use the technology to initiate downstream service providers in accordance with your service level agreements. The individual gets a wealth of information about their risk and likely restrictions or requirements on their upcoming travel, including information about health and security, whether or not they need a negative test prior to arrival, what the in-country experience is likely to be like, including whether face masks are required, and what's needed on re-entry or return to their home destination. All of this together is bringing you a comprehensive end-to-end solution, and we think that the technology that we're using to identify and amalgamate the information about your employees wherever they are uses a combination of data sources as well as active algorithms to give you the most accurate picture. And we can flexibly configure the rules engine and logic that's applied to give you a pragmatic assessment of risk, both in advance of a trip, travel or move, and once actual travel patterns and days become available, post-travel management as well. So I will pause there and say thank you very much for listening to the technology demonstration. I hope I managed to give you a high level understanding of the technology solution. And I think I will hand back now and open up for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca. That really gave us, I think, a great insight into how the technology solution can really support organizations with that compliance management framework. Okay, so we have reached the portion of Q&A for this session. So thank you. I know we've already have a couple of great questions that have been shared in the Q&A portion of the demo. So let's jump right in. The first question I have here, and I think, David, I am going to address this one to you, is how much of the onboarding work and technology learning is on the client company?
Okay, thanks, Alex. Great question. So as I think Rebecca alluded to during the demonstration, obviously there is, there would need to be an implementation phase where we would need to understand your organisation's business rules and tolerance for risk in a number of different areas. But essentially, once those have been, codified to the system, the second part of the question in terms of how much do organisations need to learn the technology or learn how to utilise it? that's essentially where the Cartus management team would come in. So from a day-to-day basis, they would be running the reports, looking at the various risk factors, and then reporting back out to the client organisation on an agreed cadence. And then that may also be, by agreement, we may also be automatically triggering some of the other vendors. So whether that's your tax provider, your social security provider, your immigration partner, if indeed they're outside of the preferred partners that are already integrated, because there is that flexibility. So no real need to learn how to operate the technology. That's the piece that we would manage for client organizations. We've definitely seen a need for that, but obviously, yes, there obviously would be the upfront configuration.
Thank you, David. And actually, I'll stay with you for this next question as well. What do you think sets Topia and the Cartus solution, this joint solution, apart from other solutions in the market?
Okay, again, good question. I won't pretend to have analysed every solution in the market, but based on my understanding, the real big differentiator, well, there are two actually. I think the first one is the technology, in that this is about monitoring risk and giving organisations to make an intervention before there's a problem, versus someone having to identify a particular employee where there may be risk. And in my experience, in those situations, it's typically already too late. So I think that's one of the big differentiators. And then the second one is what I just really mentioned, which is in our solution, Cartus essentially will manage the technology for you, so that there's little day-to-day requirements from the actual clients. Knowing how busy everybody is today, having to operate or manage this on a day-to-day basis would be onerous, probably.
Thank you. Okay, I have a great question here for you, Steve. And it is, could you go into a little more detail about your integrations, especially Concur, which is a huge part of HR teams' daily workflow?
That is a great question. Absolutely happy to dig in a little bit more on that. So we have had a very long relationship with Concur, actually dating back many, many years. And I think that off-the-shelf integration and making that easy for teams is critical. So in almost all cases, it's as easy as flipping a switch almost on the Concur side of things to feed data. There's no new custom field mapping, no new setups, no IT time needed for your teams. So nice and easy from that perspective. And actually, I think it was back in 2017, we were awarded, Topia Compass was the Concur App Center Partner of the Year. So a trusted partnership. We've got their product team on speed dial. So as we're thinking about innovations and advancements on our side, it's done very closely in collaboration with them. And I think Rebecca also mentioned a similar relationship we have at BCD Travel as well. So we understand that it's not one size fits all for every organization, but for those using Concur or BCD, very, very quick, and we also support many other solutions in the market as well.
Great. And actually, this next question, Steve, ties in very nicely. Our audience is asking, is there a company size specifically that should be using this technology? How might it differ dependent on their population size?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, and for me, it highlights the benefit of technology and the ability to scale up and down. So we have organizations that have as small as 10 travelers that are being tracked in a given year, right? So particularly in sort of asset management and finance industries, where the implication of maybe an MD being in the wrong place have catastrophic impact for your finances and your tax bill at the end of the year. That can make a lot of sense, and the technology flexes nicely down. On the other end of the spectrum, we have organizations with tens of thousands of their employees flowing through the platform, actively looking at where people have been, whether it's active tracking methods or travel and expense data. And the great thing about that is, in many cases, even for those larger organizations, there's a lot of analysis happening, but it may only flow up a small percentage of employees that create a risk profile, then therefore need further management, payroll withholding, or what have you. So I think the great great thing about technology is it scales to all organizations, all sizes and shapes, and also those different use cases, which I mentioned. That nice matrix approach allows us to be confident we can, together with Cartus, make the right solution for organizations of all shapes and sizes.
Great. Thank you so much. The questions are flowing in. Much appreciated. Rebecca, I'm going to pose this next one for you, please. What does a pre-trip travel assessment actually look like?
Great question. So I showed a little bit of the example in that demo, but I can slow down a little and go back to have a look. So let me share my screen. Okay, so the pre-travel assessment, the flow of the assessment is, first of all, we're identifying that travel or trip using hopefully the integration with the travel provider, but we're also able to kick off a manual assessment if we just want to understand the implications even in advance of booking any trip or travel. In this example, Dana Clark has booked some upcoming travel using SAP Concur, and Topia has assessed the data in accordance with who Dana is, what are the days that she's likely to spend in the location, and have come up with the fact that we need to undertake a bit more of a detailed assessment. So let's, in this case, send Dana over to Germany. She would be confirming and clarifying this information about the destination, entry and exit dates. That's entered, automatically pre-filled from the Topia integration. And then she's confirming her planned activity as she's undertaking that new trip. Let's select that she's carrying out existing duties in another office, and she is also attending a client review meeting. And then she just needs to click view results to get a quick outcome. In this example here, we're asking for a little bit more information based on what she said in that activity stage. So we're going to say that we're going to confirm her salary location and her contract location, because these can have an impact on the likely immigration risk requirements. And then she gets the output of the results from that assessment. So the assessment is as much as possible pre-filled with the information that we already have, either about the trip itself or the employee from the HCM portal, and also backed up by any prior historical travel data, documentation, passports or visas already held. And then the assessment itself can be accessed via browser on your laptop, or it's mobile enabled too, can be accessible via a smartphone. And as much as possible, we're pre-filling the fields for the individual, but then taking them through a guided assessment that's intelligently adapted to the answers that they're giving. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Rebecca. Certainly does. Okay, I think we have probably time for one more question. So David, I'm going to pass this last one to you. And that is, what can clients expect from data reporting and dashboards?
Yeah, sure, Alex. I'm going to use that favourite response. It depends. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that whilst there are a whole raft of automated reports that have been designed as part of the platform, as we know, organisations tend to like their own custom reports. So again, as part of the configuration and implementation of the technology, we would agree how organisations would want to see the data, what reports they would want, the cadence, who they should be sent to within the organisation. So it really is everything and anything. And I think Rebecca's demonstrated the capability. So everything you've seen today is reportable. So yeah, really within some restraints, anything is possible.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much for answering those questions, our panel. Should any of our participants in today's session still have further questions after this meeting, you can certainly direct those to the address on the screen now. I also wanted to let you know that we will be hosting a follow-up webinar for the Americas region that will also include a Topia Compass demo. So please do share with your colleagues in region if they would like to join that session. We will be sending out some invites in the coming weeks. With that, we will close for today. I want to thank our panelists and all of you for attending. And we hope you found this useful, informative, and look forward to connecting with you all in the near future. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.